Ethan never believed that a single notification could change the way a heart beats, until the night he watched the words "Seen 8:14 p.m." sit beneath the last message he had poured his courage into. For 3 days he stared at it, refreshing the chat, hoping the tiny typing bubble would appear, hoping she would say anything, even a rejection. But she didn't. Maya Davenport, the woman whose smile had rewired the rhythm of his dull, careful life, had simply left him on read. And until the moment she stood on his doorstep, with rain dripping from her hair, with guilt swimming in her eyes, and with a trembling "Ethan, please," he never expected to see her again. What happened in between was something he never told anyone. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps us bring more heartfelt stories to you. Ethan Brooks was the kind of man who lived quietly. The world had taught him to keep expectations low, not because he lacked dreams, but because life, especially after his father's passing, had made disappointment feel like an old, familiar neighbor. He worked at a modest community print shop, the kind of place where people came to laminate childhood, photos, or print resumes filled with hope. He talked little, smiled often, and kept his heart guarded, until Maya arrived in his life, like a warm gust in early spring, unexpected and impossibly gentle. She was everything he wasn't, spontaneous, loud in all the right ways, full of the kind of energy that people didn't just notice, they gravitated toward. She walked into the shop needing invitations printed for a local fundraiser she was hosting, and Ethan remembered how she laughed while looking at her own design mistakes, unbothered and bright. She lingered to ask how his day was, complimented the handmade calendar he kept by the desk, and smiled like she meant it. It wasn't love at first sight, not exactly. It was more like hope at first sight. What began as small talk turned into long conversations. Maya started stopping by even when she didn't need anything printed. She brought him coffee, always the wrong flavor, always accompanied by a teasing apology. Ethan found himself waiting for her visits in a way that made the minutes feel both exciting and terrifying. But Maya wasn't just sunshine. She had shadows she carried quietly. Ethan could see it, even when she insisted she was fine. She lived alone, far from her family, and had been through a difficult breakup months before they met. Her ex had hollowed out her trust, leaving her with invisible fractures she tried to hide with jokes and bright hairstyles. But Ethan never pointed them out. He simply listened, offered warmth without pressure, and let her heal at her own pace. Over time, their bond deepened. Maya would talk about her dreams of starting a nonprofit for kids stuck between difficult homes, and Ethan would share how he wanted to expand the print shop into a creative hub for the community. They encouraged each other in ways that felt new, gentle, safe. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he wasn't too quiet or too cautious or too ordinary. With Maya, he felt enough. One chilly November evening, after closing the shop and walking Maya to her car, Ethan felt something shift inside him, the kind of shift that makes a person brave. She leaned against the driver's seat door, tucking a strand of her dark curls behind her ear, laughing about a kid from her program who insisted he'd seen Bigfoot behind the school gym. The parking lot lights cast a soft glow over her face, and something in that moment whispered to Ethan that it was time. They had danced around the possibility for months. He had asked her to a movie once. She had turned it into a group outing. She had lingered outside the shop for no reason. He had pretended not to notice. They were two people circling the same truth, afraid to collide. That night, as she finished her story, Ethan took a breath. He felt all the way down to his bones and said the 4 words he had rehearsed hundreds of times, "I really like you." His voice was soft but steady. He thought she would smile. He thought she would at least say something. Instead, she froze, not visibly, but in the way her eyes flickered too fast and her fingers clenched around her car keys. She whispered something vague about the cold and slipped into her car with a shaky wave. Ethan stood there in the parking lot long after she drove away, unsure whether he had ruined something precious. Hours later, he sent her a text. Just a simple message. I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable. I care about you, Maya. It was kind, cautious, and true. She saw it immediately. He watched his phone light up, seen 8:14 p.m., but no reply came. Not that night, not the next day, not the day after. It wasn't just silence. It was an echo that pressed against Ethan's chest until breathing felt like lifting something heavy. He told himself she might be busy, she might need time, she might be scared. Still, he checked his phone so often that the screen smudged with fingerprints. He lost sleep. At work, he printed orders wrong. He ate meals without tasting them. He tried to convince himself that caring for someone didn't entitle him to anything, but heartbreak is rarely rational. He missed her voice, her mismatched coffees, her way of finding light in ordinary things. He missed what they could have been. What Ethan didn't know was that Maya had spiraled the moment she read his message. She left her phone on the kitchen counter and cried harder than she had in months. Not because she didn't care, because she cared too much. She'd been abandoned before, betrayed before, told she was too much before. Ethan was the one person who had treated her heart like something that mattered, and instead of embracing it, she panicked. The weight of her past convinced her she would break him the way she'd been broken. So she did the only thing her fear knew how to do. She ran, she hid, she avoided. But silence has a way of unraveling guilt, and guilt has a way of forcing truth to the surface. On the third night, after hours of pacing her apartment, Maya got into her car, drove across town, and stood at Ethan's doorstep trembling. She knocked softly at first, then harder when he didn't answer. When he finally opened the door, he looked exhausted, eyes red, hair messy, wearing a worn gray hoodie that sagged at the shoulders. But even then, his first reaction wasn't anger, it was concern. She broke the moment with an apology that tumbled out in a single breath, soaked in rain and fear. Ethan led her inside, and there, in the dim glow of his living room lamp, the truth spilled between them. She explained everything. Her past, her panic, her belief that she didn't deserve someone like him. She admitted she left him on read because she didn't know how to respond without ruining something good. Ethan listened, every word soaking into a heart that had been bruised but was still willing to forgive. He didn't interrupt, didn't scold, didn't demand anything. He simply told her that fear didn't make her unworthy, that healing wasn't linear, that he wasn't asking her for perfection, just honesty. What followed wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Real life rarely works that cleanly. Trust takes time. Healing takes patience. But that night they sat together on the couch, close enough to feel each other's warmth, but not close enough to rush anything. Maya cried quietly. Ethan handed her tissues without judgment. They talked until almost dawn, about boundaries, about taking things slow, about leaving past hurts in the past. It was fragile, but it was real. In the weeks that followed, both of them worked hard to rebuild the connection. Maya learned to communicate her fears before shutting down. Ethan learned to give her space without assuming the worst. They took small steps, coffee at a cafe with mismatched chairs, long walks in the park, late-night talks on the phone. One evening, Maya showed up to the print shop with a jar full of folded paper hearts. Inside each one was something she appreciated about him, his patience, his steadiness, his kindness. Ethan kept that jar by his bedside and opened a new heart each night. It grounded him. It reminded him that the risk he took that November evening had opened a door to something deeper than he ever imagined. Months passed and spring washed over the city in pale greens and hopeful breezes. One warm evening, Maya and Ethan stood on his porch. The same porch where she had once arrived shaking with fear. And she told him she was ready. Ready to try. Ready to love without running. Ready to choose him not just with her words but with her actions. Ethan didn't respond with a dramatic declaration. He simply reached for her hand and said he'd been ready all along. Their love wasn't sudden fireworks, it was steady, careful growth, like sunlight coaxing a flower open after a long winter. They still had days when old wounds resurfaced, but they faced them together, and slowly, surely, a future began to take shape. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more emotional stories. Your support truly means the world. Before we end, tell me in the comments, have you ever reconnected with someone after fear or silence pushed you apart? In the end, Maya never forgot the night she left him on read. But she remembered far more the night she found the courage to show up at his door. The night they chose honesty over fear, healing over running, love over silence. And sometimes, that's all a second chance really is, showing up.